Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and hi everyone. Today our group will discuss one of the management accounting practices which is value chain analysis or VCA. My name is Nur Atira Azahar and I will be the first presenter for this presentation. So before I proceed, this is our presentation outline in which we will discuss a brief introduction of VCA as well as its implementation. And we will also highlight the benefits, issues and challenges of implementing VCA as well as conclusions. In order to understand what is value chain analysis, we must first know what is a value chain. According to Helin and Major 2006, a value chain can be defined as the full range of activities which are required to bring a product or service from conception through the different phases of production, delivery to final customers, and final disposal after use. In other words, value chain is a step-by-step business activity to bring a product or a services until it reaches the customers. VCA technique was introduced by Michael Porter in the 1980s as a tool for companies to achieve competitive advantage. The purpose of VCA is to assess the company's performance in terms of the value chain, whether there are any non-value added activities in the operation of the company. By doing so, the company can take corrective action to the non-value added activities in order to increase the business efficiency as well as uncover the company's competitiveness. The diagram shown in the slides is the value chain model that was introduced by Michael Porter. Generally, the activities involved in a company can be divided into 9 generic types, which can be categorized into 2, which are primary activities and support activities. Primary activities consist of 5 main activities which are directly related to the production and selling of the product, while support activities go across the primary activities to provide support and coordinate their function as best as possible. From the diagram, we can see that 5 primary activities consist of inbound logistics, operation, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and service, while support activities consist of procurement, technology, human resource management, and firm infrastructure. The dotted line in the diagram reflect that each support activity can be linked to specific primary activity to provide support to the entire value chain. So how do we implement value chain analysis to achieve competitive advantage? Basically, there are 2 approaches that can be used, which are strategic cost management or differentiation advantage. For strategic cost management, the first step is to identify the value chain activities and disaggregate the firm into separate activities. Adequate knowledge and understanding in the chain of processes is required in this stage. The second step is to establish the relative importance of different activities in the total cost of product. The cost breakdown for each activity needs to be done here. Next is to compare cost by activity and identify the cost drivers. Cost drivers for each activity should be recognized as it can be driven up or down due to several factors such as the nature of the activity. Next is to identify linkage and interrelationships in the value chain so that the cost of activities can be optimized as a whole in order to achieve overall cost reduction. And last but not least, identify opportunities for reducing costs and or improving value so that the company can utilize all of the opportunities available to reduce the cost activities. As for differentiation advantage, the steps involved are almost the same as a strategic cost management approach, but instead of identifying cost drivers, differentiation approach identify the drivers of uniqueness in each activity. For example, product feature or product performance, the skill and experienced employees, and so on. So from that, the manager should select the most promising differentiation variables for the firm as well as locate linkage between the value chain of the firm and that of the customer. Differentiation is not simply about offering different product features. It is also about identifying and understanding every possible interaction between the firms and its customer and us, how this interaction can be enhanced or changed in order to deliver additional value to the customer.
Hi, I am Ruby Ismail and I'll be explaining about the benefit of the value chain analysis. So basically, I'll be focused on these 3 main benefits. The first is low cost advantage. Second, improve flow of materials and product. And lastly is, firm will be able to compare their activities with competitors. So the first benefit for a company that adopting this strategy is low cost advantage. It's allowed firm to identify those profitable value creating activity with those who are not. So by assessing value creating activities, it will allow firm to establish the cost driver for each of the process, and it also will allow for cost improvement strategy to be implemented, which focus on reducing the cost and maintaining or improving the customer value. Second benefit is it improves the flow of materials and products. Since value chain analysis really value the existing of the customer within the business, the time taken for a product to be delivered to the end consumer is the key indicator of the efficiency of the product flows, because the faster the product be delivered to the end customers, the more efficient the flow of the product itself. So when value chain management is implemented effectively in the business, the flow of product and materials actually can be improved through the accurate forecasting of sales, demand, and also in terms of the inventory management. It also will minimize the delays, and the product will be more traceable and visible throughout the supply chain. The last point is, firm will be able to compare its activity with their competitors. Through the comparison, actually, the firm can focus on the customer's perceived value of the product and services, evaluate differentiation strategies, for example, to improve the product features, marketing channels, and pricing in order to enhance the customer value. This ultimately will help the firm to identify innovative ways to perform value-creating activity, which result in improved overall performance of the company.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Uzma. So I will be presenting on the issues and challenges in value chain analysis. But before that, I will explain a little bit about GVC or Global Value Chain. According to Razama Rizwan, the Deputy Director of BIPD, GVC is the series of stages in the production of a product or service for sale to the consumers. Each stage in the production process must be able to add value to the product, and at least 2 stages are in different countries. For example, a bike assembled in Finland with components imported from Italy, Japan, and Malaysia and exported to the Arab Republic of Egypt is considered as GVC. So by this definition, in order to be considered as participating in GVC, a country, a sector, or a firm must engage in at least one stage in a GVC. So the first issue that will be discussed is interfirm relationship. Interfirm relationship concerns the relationship between the firms and its buyer as well as suppliers in the supply chain. So this is due to the supplier's activity may impact the buyer's activities in terms of cost and differentiation and vice versa. Therefore, this issue emphasizes on the needs of the firm and its buyer or supplier to jointly performing VCA so that it will bring accuracy in evaluating cost and performance of each activity. So the possibility of jointly performing a VCA will depend on the firm's willingness to share the information with the other firms in the value chain. So when the buyers and the suppliers open their books to each other and exchange cost and performance information, concerns may arise about their bargaining position and about information spillovers to the competitors. Therefore, they will not easily exchange their private information before they are confident that this information will not be used against them. So when the firms are willing to exchange information and the VCA indicates that the changes in the current processes will improve value chain performance, the second and the third concern may arise. With respect to the division of costs and benefits, Tompkins 2001 maintains that collaborative decisions need to be taken based on 2 levels of analysis. So the first one is the investment must earn an adequate rate of return for the risk associated with the project. So second, the partners need the prospect of receiving a fair share of benefits before they are willing to participate in the project. So in addition to realizing a sufficient rate of return, when investment need to be made in specific assets which have little value outside the relationship, the investing firm needs to be confident that this investment will not be appropriated by the other party. So these 3 concerns thus require the cooperating firms to have confidence that opportunistic behavior will not occur. This confidence may come from the presence of trust, which that has been built during previous interactions. However, if the level of trust is insufficient, the firms need to implement formal controls to gain this confidence before they are willing to participate in a VCA and act on its outcomes. Such controls may take a variety of forms, such as contractual agreements on profit and cost sharing, ordering quantities and length of the relationship, as well as confidentiality agreements for information exchange.
Alright, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Mastura binti Rohizam. So now moving on to the next point, which we derive from the article of Potentials and Limitation, Global Value Chain in Donor Interventions. So there are three key challenges that we point out from the article, which are conflict of interest, changes in global production, and lastly, structural and asymmetric power relationship. Alright, the first one is the conflict of interest that occur among different actors that will possibly reduce the effectiveness of the value chain interventions. So there is assumptions of lead firms with the value chain is that the firm's interest may be aligned with the supplier interest, as well as it allows the firms to develop their objective in developing countries. However, when the lead firms are trying to suppress the technological transfer, this would lead to having a conflict of interest with the local stakeholders, as well as conflict with the government. So lead firms are said to always trying to reduce the bargaining power of suppliers by diversifying their supply base. When this happens, this might lead the bankruptcy upon local firms. Okay. So next point is the changes in global production. So the less developed countries and small firms is excluded from global value chain, and also small firms will be facing difficulties in accessing or implementing the interventions of global value chain. This means that the global contract manufacturers that have a bigger skills of economies towards each supplier, they are having advantages of getting the first tier supplier and assemblers as well as raw material, and these advantages have become the disadvantages for the smaller firms and also SME to access in the chain. So this will lead the small firms and less developed countries will be at disadvantages due to the changes in global production. Okay, so now next is the structural and asymmetric power relationship. So these challenges arise as developed countries often compete with each other, especially when the global demand and supply structure keep shifting. So besides, these challenges also means that the imbalanced power in developing countries, as the lead firm will exploit in the chain, as they will control and monitor the supplier. So therefore, when exploitation occur, the lead firm will be having power to control over the chain. So these are some issues and challenges that need to be catered on in order to implement the global value chain intervention. So by that, that's all from me. Thank you. I will pass the floor to the next presenter.
As for the last issue or challenges in value chain analysis, I will touch on how COVID-19 has impacted GVCs. So there are three channels on how COVID-19 has impacted GVCs. As for the first one, direct impact, it can be associated with the situation when the companies participating in the GVCs need to stop their production due to health precautions. This is because the companies may need to follow the standard operating procedures set by the government regarding limited movement order and social distancing rules, which will cause them to halt their business operations for some time. Next, COVID-19 infections and death also reduce the participation of labor in the production process. Secondly, there is a supply chain impact when the production in one location requires inputs from another, and this other location is directly impacted by COVID-19. Therefore, companies relying on the inputs manufactured in the area will severely impacted through supply chain linkage. The supply chain impact can also come from a disruption in the international transport networks, where the disaster does not affect the production of inputs, but rather the intermediary means of transportation. Lastly, there can be a demand impact, whereby production continues but there are fewer consumers willing to buy the products. A demand impact can also result from a surge in demand as observed in COVID-19 for some key medical supplies, or a shift in demand as observed for some food products with the closure of restaurants and hotels. Volatility in demand also affects domestic supply chains, but GVCs play a role in the transmission of economic shocks through demand channels, when demand is decreasing in one geographic area and not the others. Lower demand for final products in a given country reduces demand for input produced in other countries. This phenomenon can affect multiple locations at once when the crisis is global. That is all for the issues and challenges.
To conclude this presentation, we can say that value chain analysis is an essential process that helps the company to concentrate on value-creating activities and eliminate the wasteful one to enforce the value proposition as well as bring more benefit into the company. With that, that's all from us, and thank you for watching.